A wonderful Friday morning to everyone. Bitcoin at 77,500 US dollars and thus still stable. Nothing changed. That's really the best way to put it, because Trump once again wants to have control over Hormuz. Iran says no, they'd rather lay new mines down there, but Trump still insists that he has control. Yesterday there was a bit of, well, trouble again, you could say. The air defense system in Iran was activated. Then the prices briefly crashed, but yeah, it turned out, oh no, it was nothing serious at all. So basically the same shit as every day at the moment. Unfortunately, there's nothing new about Timmy that I can report to you. The whale is still on his sandbank. Sorry that I don't have any 24/7 updates for you, but we have to focus on what's important, and right now that's clearly the weather. No, just kidding. Yeah, Bitcoin is definitely at 77,500 US dollars. It's tough. I'm telling you honestly, the price action is still really miserable. The news situation, as I said, is neither here nor there. We're still going to take a look at everything now. But before we get started, as always, feel free to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course, feel free to join the free Telegram talk and signal group. If you're interested in updates, news, and signals, feel free to join. You can find the link for that for free down in the video description. And of course, if you're still looking for an exchange where you can trade all of this, feel free to register with my partner exchange, WEEX. At the moment, there's still up to 10,000 USDT in bonus credit or starting volume available. Feel free to check it out. Link is down in the video description. All right, let's get started. So as I said, Bitcoin is at 77,600 US dollars with little price action and very, very low volume. Meanwhile, oil prices rose again yesterday due to the Iran crisis. Global stock prices have fallen, at least in the short term, because while Bitcoin remains stable, oil prices are on the rise again. It fits again. I already mentioned it yesterday in the live stream. There are usually 3 indicators that should move completely in opposite directions. So on the one hand, of course, moving in sync, these are oil, the dollar, and of course the volatility index. If we take a look, oil is back at $96 and the dollar is now almost at 99 again. And if we take a quick look at the volatility index over there, we're still above 20. And yesterday there was that brief spike again. That was when the air raid alarm was triggered over Tehran, or rather when the air defense system was activated. But what stands out in this phase is that we now have 3 rising prices from 3 parameters that would normally cause prices to fall. And what are we seeing at the moment? Simply the exact opposite, or rather still a sideways phase. It still feels like there's a big hedge being built up across the entire market. And that means this whole mood we have right now, which in my opinion is still a bit too bullish, nothing has changed about that, is still being hedged a bit because no one knows what might happen again, for example, over the weekend. Will there be peace again, which has supposedly been going on for 6 weeks now? Will there be a new escalation? Will there really be a ground offensive over there? No one knows. And at the moment, people are trading a bit based on what they know, and that is that there is currently a ceasefire and a bit of calm. Those are the only hopes the markets have right now in some way. Whether that's actually the reality is another question, because in the meantime, Meta and Microsoft are laying off more employees. Up to 23,000 jobs could be affected. Well, I'd say for stock investors in these 2 companies, it might actually be a good thing, because lower costs could mean higher margins, since they also invest a lot in data centers, which of course leads to a lot of expenses as well. That's why they're not hiring new employees, or rather they're laying off employees instead. You have to look at it that way, but still it means there will be another 3,000 or even 23,000 newly unemployed people as a result. Speaking of economic data, today there is really absolutely nothing happening on the markets, but what caught my eye a bit were, in the end, the CPI figures in Japan. Because they are up again. Last time they were in the negative, but this time they've risen to 0.4%. The national CPI figures have also risen to 1.5%, up from 1.3% previously. So here too, you can now see that due to the Strait of Hormuz and its closure, prices in Japan are also clearly rising again, which in turn leads to, and we also discussed this topic yesterday in the live stream, the Bank of Japan supposedly tending to keep interest rates unchanged in April. Today, in a week, or actually in less than a week, on April 28th, the interest rate decision will be made in Japan, which will of course be very important for the markets again. Because if we take a quick look at the yen is at an absolute low point, or rather in a complete downward spiral. Nothing is happening there at all, just brief spikes upward into this green box. That's it. But the yen itself is performing catastrophically. At the same time, however, the bonds over there are still, I would say, at all-time high levels. So there's relatively little happening to suggest that things are easing up in Japan. That means the carry trade topic will become very, very interesting next week if the Bank of Japan raises interest rates. Somehow I still assume, well, of course, the probability has dropped a bit now, especially since the global probability for it is only at 8%. But if the CPI prices here keep rising and the yen remains this weak and the bonds stay this high, Japan will have to do something sooner or later. The exact same thing applies, of course, to the USA. Here, too, bond yields have been rising significantly again in the last few days. 4.3% on the 10-year bonds is still way, way too high. In the EU, it's still over 3%. For all homeowners or borrowers, have fun. It's going to be a great refinancing if you haven't planned ahead. And yet, Bitcoin is still at 77,000 US dollars. I talked about this in detail on the live stream yesterday, but I want to give you a quick summary here. For me, at the moment, if you're bullish, there are basically two possibilities. Possibility number one, my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is still absolutely in play, and at the same time, it's an overarching ABC. The targets only vary within a small range, namely my wave 4 would go up to a maximum of 83,000 to 84,000 US dollars, so there would still be a wave 4 left, followed by the final sell-off wave 5. The other possibility is that my 1, 2, 3 is at the same time an overarching A, that we are now in the B and would see prices from 93 to 100,000. Personally, I don't currently expect that, but that also doesn't mean that this B wave has to go that high. Theoretically, it could also only go up to the 0.382 level, just as we saw here above with wave 2, and in the end, it would still reach the targets that I still have in mind. That means no matter how we've risen now, point number one is that the volume is disastrous and the liquidity in the order books or here on the heat map is disastrous as well. Let's take a look at the volume. This is the volume, or rather the spot order book from a daily perspective. You can see from this that the volume has been absolutely disastrous since we had our low here around the 5th. So February 5th, when we dropped to 60,000, there was a bit more volume then, but since that point, the volume has just disappeared. And we need volume in order to see a sustainable rise in the markets. And that's something we're not seeing at the moment. And as long as that's the case, I'll just stick with this. Let's call it a more difficult phase, or rather this bearish phase, to say, hey, I'm really not convinced at all that we're about to enter a bull run or that the time for it has come. I know I'm being pessimistic here, but for me, all the indicators that I've marked out for myself, or at least the ones that are important to me, just aren't present at the moment. That's why this is pretty much my maximum for now. The 83 to, let's say, 85K range up to the golden pocket, which would also simultaneously represent the 0.382 level of the larger possible wave B. Let's see what happens. At the moment, that's the most likely scenario for me. Let's move on to the altcoins. Ethereum is still the same story. I also mentioned it yesterday in the live stream. Ethereum, Solana, any altcoin, they're all dead at the moment. There's no volume. And if we just look at this rise here, which feels weaker than Bitcoin's, that's not normal for an alleged altcoin season or anything like that. Altcoins are just not interesting at all right now. Solana is just floundering down there, even though last week there was supposedly a rave rug pull and somehow the mood just isn't there. Oh, great. Finally, we're really back and all that. The rises are very short, the volume is very low, and yes, the funding rates are in the negative, but the volume behind all these funding rates is still very, very low. And that's exactly the big problem we have. That's what's really missing for us right now. And the same goes for XRP or other altcoins, of course. You can say whatever you want, but that's just really missing right now. Let's move on to the traditional markets. Let's start with gold. Still stable, nothing has changed. I'm still sticking with my ABC scenario in the worst case. That would mean that we would really see another absolute sell-off in the markets where gold would suffer again before we then, let's say, enter the recovery phase and interest rate cuts come, which would, of course, push the gold price back up. That means I am sticking with my targets, both long-term and mid-term, at around $6,000. Silver, of course, is the same story. We've already talked about it being above $1, and it continues to be on an upward trend. The yen is absolutely weak. And as for the euro, where do we have the euro against the dollar? Here, the euro against the dollar is still in the same range. So this is an absolute sideways phase. I still hope that the dollar will make one last move upward before the carry trade is unwound and before, in the end, stocks are sold off again, because the dollar needs a value above 100 for it to make sense to sell stocks, of course. So let's see if we might try a new long position as a hedge at the lower edge of this range, around 113, maybe 114, and then possibly if the dollar sells off in a carry trade, then I would say to invest heavily in the euro here. That's kind of the idea behind it at the moment. Otherwise, regarding the DAX, if wave 5 is completed, which has now moved nicely upward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it has now also reached a higher but lower high for the time being. That would also mean for those who are paying attention with Bitcoin that we might also see on a larger scale an AB and then a significantly lower Z here as well. At the moment, that would be the somewhat prioritized scenario. Dow Jones still in an ABC pattern, same story. NASDAQ, although it hit a new all-time high, I'm even allowing for a bit more room up to $27,500 here. With an overshooting B, I'm definitely still on board. And it's the same with the S&P 500 actually, the volume is catastrophic. But for that, we have to look at the index opening. Volume is catastrophic, nothing much happening. Gaps below. Here too, I'm currently assuming an overshooting B. Other than that, yes, I have. I also wanted to point out to you again that I've created a new category here for stocks in the Telegram group, so feel free to check that out as well. Stocks, ETFs, all the information about them is in the Telegram group, and maybe that's why I want to briefly mention this again now. MatPace Holdings actually delivered outstanding earnings, but the stock price was completely punished, dropping over 30%. But for those who paid attention during last week's live stream, well, the week before last, before the vacation, we talked about how we have a beautiful ABC formation here with this gap that still needs to be filled, and that means the buy zone is now almost reached. It's only 6% left. If you dare, or if you're interested in starting a savings plan here and have taken a closer look at the company in the background, feel free to go ahead. Otherwise, that's it from me. I wish you all a wonderful start to the weekend. Later, there will be a precious metals and commodities update on smart crypto. Feel free to check it out. And otherwise, that's it from me. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We'll hear from each other again on Sunday for the live stream at 7 p.m. For the last time at 7 p.m. I think starting next week, we'll do it at 8 p.m. Otherwise, until then, ciao, ciao. And as always, stay crypto.